my dear friend. I believe that diversity and excellence go hand in hand. I think we live in a pluralistic society today, and we are all challenged to break out of our normative patterns. Museums are public institutions and need to reflect the public. But for the most part, the museum sector is not very diverse. And I think this is something that needs greater attention.
You bring up a point that really does work into the fabric of museum boards. It is being defined by money, Darren.
I'm very sympathetic to the circumstance for most museum boards. Public support is being reduced. The support from institutional philanthropy has been flat, and earned revenue is for the most part flat. And yet expenses are going up. Therefore, you need to raise more money, and it becomes even more important to recruit people who have significant capacity to your board.
Yes.
So in some ways, we're putting boards in a difficult situation by saying both you need more diversity and you need to raise more money.
There is a great lack of diversity in museum studies programs and in the staff of museums in the United States. Currently, only 20% of museum employees identify as minority. In recognizing the need for diversity, the AAM put out their diversity and inclusion policy statement, which reads, "The American Alliance of Museum respects, values, and celebrates the unique attributes, characteristics, and perspectives that make each person who they are. We believe that our strength lies in our diversity among the broad range of people and museums we represent. We consider diversity and inclusion a driver of institutional excellence and seek out diversity and participation, thought, and action. It is our aim, therefore, that our members, partners, key stakeholders reflect and embrace these core values." Let's look at what diversity means and consider the complexity of diversity. Diversity efforts should honor the experiences of people whose primary identity is based on their race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, age, religion, nationality, class, physical abilities, and disabilities. What I will be focusing on in this study is race. We should also acknowledge that our identities are also overlapping and numerous. University of Delaware Museum Studies program is historically populated by white females. In 2015-2016, we had 48 students, one of whom self-identified as Latino. This year, 2016-2017, we have 45 students, one whom identifies as African American, the other Latino. That's only 4.4% racial diversity in our student population. If we look at a study conducted by the Mellon Foundation in 2015, we will see that the lack of diversity in museum studies programs translates to a lack of diversity in the museum sector. Non-Hispanic white staff represent 84% of what the Mellon study identifies as the job categories most closely associated with the intellectual and educational missions of museums, including those of curators, conservators, educators, and leadership. 6% of those positions are occupied by Asians, 4% by African Americans, 3% by Hispanics, and 3% by people who identify as 2 or more races.
And when I look around, I don't see a lot of minorities in positions, either middle management or upper management. I do see a lot of minorities participating in diversified schemes, but I don't see them sort of progressing up the ladder.
So what are the issues? Lack of acculturation in museums. According to Reach Advisors, core museum visitation today is only 9% minority visitors. The NEA research shows that among minority groups that historically grounded cultural barriers to participation make museums feel intimidating and exclusionary to many people. There is no strong tradition of museum going in many communities, and there is a perception of museums as elitist. So why would a child with this mindset picture himself or herself in a museum career? Increasingly, the path toward a museum career requires a graduate degree in museum studies. Programs are generally not funded and carry price tags in the tens of thousands. Students who already carry significant undergraduate student debt may be reluctant to borrow additional funds, especially given the relatively low starting salaries in the museum field. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, an average starting salary for a museum curator was $54,000. Need museum experience in order to get a job in a museum. Internships offer opportunities to network, establish relationships with mentors, and gain new skills. Offering unpaid internships mean the museum workforce will continue to be shaped by privilege, those who can afford to work without pay. Managers often hire people who are similar to themselves. The Cubics Consultancy International Survey on Job and Cultural Fit found that more than 80% of employers across the globe place culturally fit at the top of their priority list when recruiting new hires. Here's Monica Montgomery, Strategic Director of Museum Q.
In terms of beginning conversations with ourselves, I think recognizing the implicit bias and the cultural insensitivity that sometimes we have, even, personally myself, trying to kind of demystify these things in my mind that I assume. So recently, someone said to me, "Oh, I want you to speak on a panel with a CEO." I immediately thought, "Oh, that person is a male, right?" And the person turned out to be a female, and I'm like, "Oh, like I shouldn't default to that." That's my own implicit bias that I have to overcome to realize there's space, because being a woman director myself, there's space for other women to direct and lead. So I think it's just kind of understanding your thinking, trying not to be exclusionary in your thinking, and just realizing that the unconscious bias is what keeps us stuck. But if we can envision this future, there's room for everyone in all seats of the table.
It has to be more than field trips. Studies in Latino and African American communities have shown that field trips have little to no impact on how leisure time is spent. In other words, that alone will not bring people into museums. In communities where family time is valued, bringing families into museums will increase visitation. The Imagine Asian educational program for families at the Smithsonian, which targets Asian and Asian American families, fills to capacity during weekday sessions and overcapacity on weekends. Community interest and outreach is essential for keeping donations up and costs down, allowing more people to afford visits. Currently, there are 99 full-time museum studies or musicology programs in the U.S. None are fully funded. If we are expecting people to have higher ed credentials as gateways to career paths, we need programs that are funded or more scholarship opportunities to boost diversity in the field. Paying interns closes the wealth gap and increases their chances of landing a job. Often unpaid internships are actually illegal and do not protect employees under the Title VII Act. In order to increase diversity, we must change how we approach the hiring process. This will require challenging a broad range of assumptions about how museums train, recruit, and manage the staff responsible for collections, interpretation, education, and leadership of our institutions. And lastly, as Elizabeth Merritt, director of AAM's Center for the Future of Museums, said, "To thrive in the long term, it is crucial that museums bring the demographic profile of their staff into alignment with that of the communities they serve." We need data. We need a baseline now for which future surveys can be measured.